So what I want to try to do is to give you a bit of an overview into not so much the details of the book, which are painful, 117,000 words, 150 some odd diagrams, and as we say in the book, don't take this home and read it over a weekend. This is much more like the operating manual you get when you buy a table saw or a big mainframe computer. It's really to be used as a roadmap when you have a problem or a question or an issue. And probably Steve and I, between us, have spent about 80 years of our lives. That's not 80 years each for the smart asses in the room. 80 years between us doing startups, and we are pretty certain that in that amount of time we made at least 500 really stupid mistakes personally, and we were able to get almost all of them between the covers of this book, so that in English, French, or Spanish, or any Russian, or any other of the many languages, you can read about the mistakes rather than make them for yourself. And so everyone will tell you startups are, oh, leave that open, please. Oh, ouvrez la fenêtre. I remember that from high school. Huh? Merci. 7 startups, 2 home runs, 2 sort of base hit, okay, and 3 right in the toilet. And then 27 investments, 7 IPOs, 6 right in the toilet, and everything in between. And the reason I think this is much better than the bio of Bob Dorf is that you learn so much more from your failures than your successes, particularly if you live to celebrate them and move on. And in my case, actually, number 1 and number 7 were the successes. Number 1 sold in the tens of millions, and number 7 in the low hundreds. And everything else in between was sort of a yawn. And I wish I could say that it was all that cumulative learning over the 5 in between, but a lot of it was timing and experience and so forth. And I think it's really important to recognize that as an entrepreneur, number 1, the odds of you getting it right in your first startup are so close to 0, they might as well be 0. You have so much to learn, so many mistakes to make on your own. And if you think about the sort of equation that computes a successful startup, it has so many variables and so many elements that the chances of getting them all right the first or second time are, literally quite close to 0. And the reason this math lesson matters so much is this number. This is an estimate of the number of startups in a given year in the United States in the last few years. Right? So that's more or less 2,000 startups a day. And more important, this number. 2 or 3 years later, how many of them do we remember? Not necessarily because they went to the moon financially, but because they did something important to improve the world or improve society or to build a great, sustainable, important business in education or health or whatever. And if you agree, I mean, when we think about great startups, we think about, Facebook and Groupon and Foursquare and Google, and we can rattle off 10 or 20 names if we're at all involved in this sort of industry or calling or whatever you want to call it. But when you realize that those come from an 8 or 10 year span, you really struggle to find 12 that are memorable. And if you do, that would suggest that the odds of your doing something truly dramatic are 50,000 to 1 against you.